Welcome to the second installment on wheelchair information. This one is going to focus on the components of a wheelchair and then on wheelchair fitting and propulsion. So let's take a look. This is out of your Sullivan and Schmidt's textbook, and just look at some of the different components. So we'll start here. This is the seat and this is the back of a wheelchair. Those are pretty obvious. This is the wheel, the whole thing. It has a tire portion, which is the part that actually contacts the ground, and then there's a hand rim or a push rim on the outside here, which is where if the person's propelling themselves, that's what they grasp to push themselves forward. You can see some variations on that theme, different kinds of spokes, and then some rims have little nubbies or little projections that come out, so if the person can't grip the rim, they can just kind of push the projections with the heel of their hand. Definitely need armrests on most wheelchairs. Not all chairs have them, as we saw with some of the sport wheelchairs. This is a full-length armrest. In other words, it comes the full length out. This is the desk style, where there's just a short part of the armrests, enough for the elbow to rest on, and then there's a cutout in the front so the person can get up under a table or a desk. Some armrests are removable, so they can, many are removable, as you saw with doing the sliding board transfers, and some are adjustable that you can raise and lower the height of the armrest. This whole thing here is called the leg rest, and there are different components. The front rigging is the part that just comes right here off of the wheelchair, and then the foot plate is what the foot rests on. Sometimes there'll be a little loop behind the heel to prevent the foot from sliding off backwards. It's usually just like a tough canvas, kind of like a gate belt kind of a material. And then when we look at the structure of most standard wheelchairs, they fold up in the middle, and so in order to allow them to do that, they have a cross brace design with a bolt in the middle that pivots, and so you pull up on the seat in the middle and the wheels collapse together. So this is the cross brace, and this gives the chair its structural integrity. On the very down in the back, there's a tipping lever, and so if you were propelling someone and you came to a little bump, and I should have mentioned when I did the rear wheels, on the front we have very small wheels called casters, so much like a caster on a stool or a desk chair, and those tend to be usually about 7-8 inches, maybe 5 inches, depends on the size of the chair. But anyway, if you come to a crack or a bump or something, it might be too hard for that small wheel, the small caster, to get over, so you can tip the person back a little bit, do a little bit of a mini wheelie, and that's what the tipping bar is for. So I think we hit all the high points. So as we talk about adjusting, fitting the wheelchair, we'll talk about how these components may be adjusted to create a better fit. And of course, proper fit is really important, not just for the comfort of the patient, though that's not unimportant, but to prevent skin breakdown and to fully support and stabilize the body. So just in general, we've looked at sitting posture already, so really it's no different than what we did with sitting posture, it's just that we're doing it in a wheelchair instead of a standard chair. But in general, we want the trunk upright, we want to maintain the lordosis if we can, we want a 90-degree angle at the hips. We would like it at the knees, but you're probably not going to get it, because if we go back and look at the wheelchair, the front rigging usually comes out at an angle. Now, we looked at some other wheelchairs in the previous video where the feet were kind of tucked down close, and there really weren't even two separate footrests. There was just kind of a little plate across. And so in that type of a chair, you're going to have better luck at getting a 90-degree angle, but here the legs are going to be probably out. I don't really like the way this picture looks. You would want the foot to be at 90 degrees as much as possible. Well, I guess it is. I guess the ankle is supposed to be at 90 degrees, but that would be our goal. So let's look more precisely, and we'll start with the seat height, and that kind of combines with the footrest length. So the standard seat height, you can't even see the seat in this picture, but the standard seat height is usually 19 to 21 inches from the ground. And you want to adjust the foot pedals so that there's about at least 2 inches between the bottom of the foot plate and the ground, so that it doesn't catch on things. It doesn't, if the person goes over a bumpy ground, it doesn't catch in the front and of course propel them forward out of it. And here you get a sense of that angle, the foot rigging coming out and then the foot plate kind of angling up. So that does keep the ankle at that 90-degree angle. We want the shaft of the femur to be parallel to the ground, and so it's not bad to be able to get your hand underneath and just have a little bit of space there, though I would say it's most important to make sure that the thigh is parallel, because what you want is even force or pressure supporting the body weight all along the shaft of the femur. So if the knees are too high, where is that going to put pressure back on? Right, back onto the ischial tuberosities. If the knees are sitting too low, in other words, if these footrests are positioned too low, it's going to put pressure right here on the back of the thigh as it kind of hangs off the edge of the chair. So we want the femur to be parallel to the ground. And so, you know, you have to look at the combination of the seat height with the footrest length and kind of adjust those together. Now, as we want as much support along the length of the thigh as we can get, but we don't want it to push into the popliteal fossa. There are blood vessels and nerves passing back behind the knee, so we want a couple of finger widths from the seat to the popliteal area so that we don't have excessive pressure there. Standard seat width in a standard chair is about 16 to 18 inches. You can get chairs that are narrower, you can get chairs that are wider, as we saw with the bariatric, and you should have about only about an inch width on either side. So if you put your hand up and down like they're doing, you should just be able to fit your hand in there. And that, again, you don't want it too tight because that's going to put compression on the legs, but you don't want it so wide that the person can't reach out up and over the armrests and actually get to the wheels. You do want it wide enough so that you can put a little extra clothing in there. So this is Wisconsin, and if people are going outside and they have to put a coat on or something, they want them to be able to get that on and be comfortable. But again, too wide makes it hard to propel. It also makes it hard to go through doorways, because the wider the seat, of course, the wider the overall width of the chair is, and that makes it difficult for propulsion. Standard back height is about 16 inches. And this is something I think typically that's too high on those standard chairs that you see that are meant primarily to propel other people. So in a chair where the person is going to be doing their propelling themselves, you want that to be 3 to 4 finger widths, which is about 2 inches between the axilla and the top of the seat back. And the reason for that is if you picture the person reaching back to grasp the hand rim and propel forward, they would be rubbing their upper arm against that push handle all the time if it's too high. So you want that kind of out of the way. The other thing is that you don't want pressure on the scapula, particularly the inferior angle. If it's too low, though, and depending on the person's trunk stability, they could have a very unstable trunk. Now again, we saw some sports chairs where the back was very low. I've seen some where the back barely comes up, you know, to the lumbar spine, so it might be 5 or 6 inches. So those are people with very stable trunks. But generally, you're going to look at something that's coming to the lower part of the thoracic spine. And then finally, armrest height. And again, this is rarely adjustable in a standard wheelchair, but you would definitely want to make sure that armrest height was correctly fitted in a person who was going to be a long-term wheelchair user. So standard height, again, about 9 inches above the seat. And what you want is that when the person is resting their forearms, that their shoulders are level. You don't want them having to lean forward to get rest to support their trunk and arms, but you also don't want it pushing their shoulders up into elevation. So these are the elements of fitting. One of the lab activities I'm going to have you do today is to, as you're propelling your partner around, is to critique the fitting of the wheelchair. Now we have, again, limited ability to adjust the chairs that we have. They're pretty standard chairs. So what I want you to do is to see what you think looks good about the wheelchair fitting, what you might change, and what you can't change, but what you'd like to change about the wheelchair fitting. So just use a critical eye and see what looks good and what doesn't look so good about it. We're going to finish then with a little bit about wheelchair propulsion, which is also something you're going to be doing in lab today. So you're going to be propelling the person in the wheelchair, and you're going to be behind them. You're going to go at a sedate pace. So picture that poor guy, with his hair blown back because you're going fast. Honestly, this is something I always have to remind myself of. I'm a fast walker and I'm always in a hurry. So when I propel someone or push someone, say, down to the therapy room for a therapy visit, I have to remember to go at a more moderate pace. If you've ever ridden in a car that someone else is driving and you feel like you don't have control and you're always kind of pushing that imaginary brake, that's kind of how the person in the wheelchair feels, especially if they have injured body parts and they're afraid that you're going to bang them into someone or run into a wall or something. So you want to go at a sedate pace and make the person feel comfortable. You definitely need to be careful going through doorways. Again, most doorways are barely wide enough to fit the width of a wheelchair. You pretty much have to get them at a 90-degree angle. You can't angle in more acutely than that. You definitely want to be careful around corners. Many hallways and corners have those parabolic mirrors that are up in the corners so that you can see if someone else is coming, but it's always good practice to slow down a little bit. And also you don't need to take the corner at 90 miles an hour. So you're going to be propelling each other up and down the hallways and also up and down the ramp that's outside the lab. So you'll get a chance to get some experience propelling the person. And you'll also I want to make sure everybody is also a person in the chair so you see what it's like to have someone else pushing you and how that feels. Another place I'm going to have you do is to push someone in and out of a wheelchair. And there's really two ways to do that. You can go forward and then kind of leave the person facing the back of the elevator so that you can back out. And so the benefit of coming in forward, as you can see, is you can kind of hold the door open. You can go in, and then when you come back out, there's always that gap on the floor between the floor of the elevator and the actual floor that you're going to. There's always that little gap. So if you go in forward, the disadvantage is the smaller casters may tend to get kind of caught in that little crack. But coming out backward, it's going to be a lot easier. Another disadvantage, it's kind of a social faux pas to face the back of the elevator. And if the person is propelling themselves, then they can't see the control panel or anything. I think the other advantage is that if they were backing out of the elevator, and especially if you're propelling them and you're backing out, you can have your body outside the elevator and see if there's any traffic in the hallway before you bring the person out. If they back in and then they can come out forward, then we have kind of the opposite set of advantages and disadvantages. Backing in, of course, the big wheels would be going over the crack first. You'd have less chance of getting hung up, but then coming out, that's where they would be hung up. The person's facing forward like everybody else in the elevator. They can see the floors. They can punch the buttons or whatever they need to do. But then coming out, their legs are in a more vulnerable position. And again, let's pretend you're pushing someone with a broken leg and that leg is elevated and extended out forward. If you're pushing them out of the wheelchair, somebody could come by and clip that leg before you even can see what's going on in the hallway. So, again, not really a right or wrong, but there's definitely advantages and disadvantages. And so I'll have you practice both ways, and you can kind of get a feel for what you like, and both as the propeller and as the person in the wheelchair. And then finally, you're also going to be propelling someone in a bed. Now, you're always going to stand at the head of the bed, You want to bring the bed up so that it's about waist height, so you have good body mechanics. Most beds and carts have a lever on the bottom. You can see down here where the brake is. Most of them have a lever that will allow you to put it into steering mode, where it will lock two wheels and allow two wheels to pivot so that it's easier for one person to maneuver. What I'm going to have you do is have two people pushing a bed with one person in it. And again, I want you all to rotate through, make sure you all have the experience of being at the head of the bed, the foot of the bed, and in the bed. You definitely have to be very careful going around corners, going in and out of elevators. Definitely need to have a moderate pace. You are going to have all the side rails up. We said that we don't always do that when the person's just sitting in the bed, but we are going to do it during the time that we're propelling them. But again, the main driver is going to be at the head of the bed, and the person's always going to be moving feet first. So that's the end of this video. Again, you're going to have an opportunity to practice these things in lab, so I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks a lot.